Alright team, so we are back, of course, with some Final Fantasy VII Remake content. And today we're going to do sort of an update and a conclusion to a video we did a couple of weeks ago. But before we hop into it, not a shout out for the second channel, but something I want to point out. Over on Twitter, the Final Fantasy VII Remake Twitter account actually tweeted out about Tifa. They mentioned that her unique ability, which is the triangle button ability, is a 3-stage move of Whirling Uppercut, Omni Strike, and Rise and Fall. But in one of those short little videos we were getting with Yoshinori Kitase where he talks about Tifa, he mentions her 3-stage ability being Omni Strike, Rise and Fall, and then Unbridled Strength. So I'm not entirely sure what's going on here. I don't know if there's like a miscommunication somewhere, a mistranslation somewhere, but it does appear like something's different or changed when it comes to Tifa's abilities. Anyways, on to the topic of the video. So a couple weeks ago, we did a video where we talked about whether or not the bonus summons or DLC summons will be available from the very beginning of the game. The summons we're talking about, of course, are the Chocobo Chick, Carbuncle, and Cactuar. Now, initially going into this video, I thought we had a definitive answer on whether or not the summons would be playable from the very beginning of the game because of one of the recent screenshots we got of the summons, and it's this one. So if you take notice of this image, Cloud is in a Shinra location by the logo in the background. He's fighting a sweeper enemy. He has Chocobo Chick out there. And the only time that Cloud is by himself during the Midgar segment of the original game in a Shinra location is at the very beginning of the game. So when it came to the original game, you start by yourself. You do a handful of fights on your way to the reactor just as Cloud. And then once you take the elevator down into the reactor, that's when Barret joins your team. So again, initially going into this video, I was like, there's our proof. We have Cloud by himself using a summon in a Shinra location. That's got to be the beginning of the game. The only issue is we've yet to see a fight with a sweeper enemy where Cloud's by himself. There's 2 sweeper fights at the beginning of the game during the bombing mission. We know this because of the demo footage that is out there. You fight this one going into the reactor, and you fight one on the way out. Both times, Barret is with you. So I'm not entirely sure what's happening in this image. There might be some brief moments during the Midgar segment where you could go and do some fights alone as Cloud, but there's definitely no Shinra locations where you play as Cloud alone during the Midgar segment of the original game. So this might be something new here. Plus the sweeper enemies are like kind of mini bosses, right? Because you can use the summons during those fights. So it's kind of weird that Cloud's fighting a boss by himself. So again, I thought we had proof that you got them at the very beginning of the game, but based on the footage that we have, there's never an early game fight with a sweeper enemy where Cloud's playing by himself. So I'm not sure what's going on in that image, but it's not the proof we needed. But we do have proof that you get the DLC summons relatively early in the game, and it's because of this image. Here we're seeing Carbuncle be used against the Grass Strike enemy, which also confirms that Grass Strike is a mini-boss of sorts, or possibly even its own boss fight now, because you can use summons against it. But this is an enemy you only fight in one location in Final Fantasy VII, if you don't include the Battle Square. And it's the train tunnel in Sector 4 that y'all take to get to the Sector 5 reactor once Tifa, Barret, and Cloud jump off the train. And obviously going to the Sector 5 reactor is relatively early in the original game. Now we don't know how early that's going to be in the remake because of areas and things being expanded and possibly new segments of the game. But assuming that it's, close to the beginning of the game like the original was, we either get Carbuncle super early in the game or we already have it whenever we start the game. We also have Cactuar being used relatively early in the game against this Hedgehog Pie enemy. This is right after we get Aerith. This is in Sector 5. This is pretty much the exact same area where we fought Root at. And again, this is pretty early on in the game when it comes to the original. This is right after blowing up the Sector 5 reactor. So pretty much right after the image we just looked at with Carbuncle. And looking into it some more, the sweeper enemy that Cloud's fighting in this image is 100% the Sector 1 reactor sweeper enemy. It's the same one that we see Barret and Cloud fighting. And if we layer these summon images on top of each other, you can see that Cloud has progressively more HP. So the first one being the sweeper fight with Chocobo Chick, 1300, Carbuncle, 1500, Cactuar, 1900. So the sweeper fight is definitely happening earlier in the game, which kind of adds to that possibility of it being the first reactor. But something that possibly throws a wrench into all of this is we have an image of Ifrit fighting a similar sweeper enemy in what appears to be the same location at probably the same exact time because Cloud has the same stats, 1326 max HP and what appears to be the exact same max MP. The thing is, a lot of people are under the assumption because of the Abzu gameplay that we do not get Ifrit until then, which I understand why people think that. That's what it looks like when you're watching this gameplay. But I mentioned in that video we did a couple weeks ago that this fight, this gameplay could have been done for promotional purposes. There's no guarantee that this is when we actually acquire Ifrit. And when it comes to this first game in the remake project, we have no basis of knowing when we're going to acquire the summons because there were no summons found at all in Midgar. As for acquiring Ifrit near the beginning of the game, near the Sector 1 reactor, it's not entirely unheard of. If you go back to the original Final Fantasy VII, we actually find a couple summons near reactors. We have the Titan summon found at the destroyed Gungaga reactor, and you have the Phoenix materia found at the top of Fort Condor, which is also a Maka reactor. And it's possible that's the route they're taking when it comes to FF7 Remake, so we could potentially find Ifrit near the Sector 1 reactor, possibly get Shiva near the Sector 5 reactor, because we see it being used in a fight with Elagor, which is the train graveyard, which is sometime after Wall Market, which means you acquire Shiva sometime before then. And to me, it makes sense to get the summons super early in the game because, as we know, their use is very limited. They can only be used against boss fights and strong enemies. And when it comes to the Abzu boss fight, that's going to take place, if we're basing it off the original game, roughly about halfway or more into the story. Because if we do a quick TLDR of the Midgar segment story, it's bombing mission, go back to the Sector 7 slums, pick up Tifa, Sector 5 reactor, fall down to the slums, meet Aerith, go through the Sector 5 and 6 slums to Wall Market, Don Corneo, down to the sewers, fight Abzu, train graveyard, Sector 7 slums, tragedy happens, Aerith gets kidnapped, we go to the Shinra building, and that's the end of the Midgar segment, with Abzu taking place roughly around the middle of the game, middle of the story anyway for the Midgar segment. I just don't see us going that long without being able to use summons, especially when they're so limited in use. What it really comes down to is if we're supposed to take these recent screenshots at face value. And if so, this fight is definitely happening early game. Which also means we get Ifrit somewhere in or near the Sector 1 reactor as well. If we reference the brief amount of gameplay we have of Ifrit from the Tokyo Game Show trailer, it appears to be the same area as that image we looked at earlier. Cloud has the same max HP of 1326, which is less HP than he has in the Abzu boss fight. It's actually almost 1,000 less HP, which tells me that we get Ifrit a significant amount of time before the Abzu boss fight. And to add on to this even further, I was skimming through some of the gameplay, we actually see Chocomog being used in the exact same fight that we've seen Ifrit being used in earlier with the sweeper enemies. We know it's the same area because of the giant stadium lights in the background. The only difference here is that Cloud has like 130 more HP, which is obviously from leveling up, but it's definitely the same area, which means we get Chocobo and Moogle and Ifrit earlier than the Abzu fight, which means we definitely get our summons early game. And if we're using that 1326 HP as sort of our basis, we leave the first reactor, the bombing mission, with about 1,000 HP or so. So this is happening pretty soon after that. So we don't have definitive proof of exactly when we're going to get access to summons, but what we do know is that when we get to that arena stadium area with the stadium lights in the background, we have Chocobo Chick, Chocomog, and Ifrit all available to us at that point. And Chocobo Chick is a pre-order bonus, so it's not something we have to find in the world, whereas we have to locate the Ifrit materia and the Chocobo and Moogle materia. And let's say one of them is found in this stadium location, that means the other was found sometime before then, which places it even earlier in the game, which is possibly that first Mako reactor. And also, if we take a look at the Airbuster fight from the E3 trailer, Airbuster was the second boss of the original game. He's the boss of the second Mako reactor we attempt to blow up, the Sector 5 reactor. Cloud has 2,300 HP, so about 1,000 more than what we've been looking at. So whatever's happened in that stadium with those sweeper enemies, where we've seen all the summons at, should be taking place pretty early in the game. So this video was so much more in depth than I thought it was going to be, but I kept coming across more and more info as I was making the video and watching gameplay. So what we know for sure, 100%, is we're going to have summons pretty damn early. I don't know if we're going to have the DLC summons at the very beginning of the game, but we're going to come across some summons pretty damn early. Not too long after the first bombing mission. So if you happen to have made it this far into the video, based on everything we talked about prior, what are your thoughts on the summons, man? Because we see Chocomog and Ifrit being used in a fight that's taking place so much earlier than even the Airbuster enemy, which was only the second boss fight in the original game. The video is kind of long, so we're just going to wrap it up. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. Hopefully you guys enjoyed the video. If you did, give it a thumbs up. Subscribe to the channel if you guys are new and want to stay updated with more Final Fantasy VII Remake content. Turn on notifications. Follow me on Twitter at @dashingdavid. I'm a Discord. Links to my social networks are in the description and in the outro. Later, guys. Or at least less like a child, give me serenity.